our core business is CRM, so customer relationship management. So we have a huge variety of products that we offer, but I think the one that we're most known for is our sales product. So our customers are companies, sometimes smaller companies, but a lot of times large companies. And they have their sales reps use Salesforce in order to track their work. So customers are companies, and then our end users, a lot of them are sales reps. And essentially, when they go to customer meetings, when they make deals or move deals along to the next stage, they record all of this information inside of Salesforce so that the company can track their performance, essentially. So usually their compensation structure is based on the information that they enter into Salesforce and how they're progressing their deals. So that's kind of like a core use case that we're most well known for. That's what Salesforce started as many years ago, long before my time. But we also have companies who are using Salesforce for a ton of other different things. It's very customizable. So we have offerings for customer service, for marketing. So some companies use Salesforce for like their entire employee base. We have a bank that uses Salesforce to have their employees clock in and out of their shifts. They've built a very custom way for them to do this on top of Salesforce. So there's a lot of variety there, and everything's really configurable. So it can get pretty complicated in terms of like who our users are and what problems we're solving.
Cool. You mentioned a very important or the keyword configurable. So just to follow up and just of curiosity, like how could you as a PM, as a senior PM, make the app configurable enough, leave enough space for it, for your users to use it, to sort of like cater big enough scenarios or diverse different kind of customer journeys, but still sort of control or make it like digestible for your team, especially for your designer and engineers to achieve or to implement?
Yeah, I mean, so that's definitely a huge challenge at Salesforce. I think because a lot of our customers are these huge companies, configuration is the most important thing. For big companies, like they have entire teams dedicated to configuring Salesforce. Some of them have development teams who actually build like custom code on top of Salesforce. So for our biggest customers, I think configuration is the most important piece because they have things that they want and they're willing to invest the resources they need to into configuring it. But we also have smaller companies who use Salesforce who might not have dedicated Salesforce admins. Admins are what we call the people within our customer companies that go in and configure Salesforce for end users. So for companies that don't have dedicated Salesforce admins, I think for them, a lot of the time, having things be simple and work out of the box is more important. So I think it's really challenging because Salesforce is very configurable, and that's something that I think the company has really prioritized because that's what our biggest companies care about. But on the other side, we do need to invest time into making sure that people can learn this tool and get up to speed. So it's definitely a tough balance to strike, and I think something that we're constantly trying to figure out, like how many resources we need to be supporting the really configurable side. And then also like how do we make it easier so people don't have to do so much configuration to get to a good experience for their end users.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And you just mentioned like a very important role for your customer or your users, like admin users or end users. And I'm not an expert at it. And correct me if I'm wrong. Like I feel like it feels like for me like there's a tension between your customers who happen to be the employers or the companies and the end users like admin users the final end user, like sales rep. And like sales rep or for some other roles like HR or I don't know, bank employees, they might not have so much motivation to document all their engagement or daily work into a sales app. But admin really love it maybe, and company really love it, so they can sort of manage and track all the employees' performance. So how do you deal with this kind of conflict and better offer values for both your customers who are paying for social service and for the end user who are really using the app?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you definitely hit on kind of the crux of a lot of the challenges we face. And I think this is the case to some extent for any B2B product, any enterprise software, where the person who's buying your product is different from the person who's using it. So our customers are companies, and they mandate that the people in their organization use Salesforce. So our customers really love us, and we have our customers tend to have admins who configure Salesforce, and those admins really love Salesforce as well. A lot of we have a huge admin community of people who this is their full-time job, and some of them didn't come in through other tech jobs. Like this was sort of their window into the software world, which is really cool. And they love being able to have this freedom to create like interfaces within their company on Salesforce. End users, though, they're required to use Salesforce for their job. And
wow, that's a big word.
yeah, they're required to, honestly. And like, I think historically, Salesforce has definitely prioritized customers and admins over the end user's experience because of that. And I think that's the case, again, in a lot of enterprise software, where it's more about the buyer and the customer than it is about the end user.
Yeah.
So I think at Salesforce, that mentality is starting to shift a little bit. I know at least on my team, we are really trying to spend more time focusing on the end user experience and making sure that they actually want to use the product and are getting value out of it, not just a way for them to record everything they're doing so their boss can see it.
Yeah.
And I think, and you're completely right, like for sales users, they really have to record everything because their compensation is based on it. But for companies that want to roll out Salesforce more broadly, who want to build custom solutions across all of their employees, they can do that and require it. But like, there's only so much you can require, right? So if users aren't motivated to come into Salesforce and put in data, they don't see the value in that, then they're not going to do it, or they're going to do the bare minimum, which is not going to be helpful when you're an executive who's trying to see a report on what people are doing in your organization. They need people to be inputting their activities on a regular basis. So I think that's one of the challenges that we are really focused on right now is how do we incentivize end users to actually like want to use the product, to actually get value from the product outside of just their company wanting them to use it.
Cool. You mentioned a very key word like incentivize the end user, and this is back to design, sort of like how do you make sure like your design or your product is solving the right problem for your end user? Like how do you connect with your customers or get a better feedback? Like do you use the NPS score, or do you do customer call or user interview or A/B testing through the different kind of versions in your product? Like how do you do this kind of product design research to better help in product management?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, it is definitely a combination of methods. At Salesforce, the product managers, at least on my team, we do go on customer calls quite a bit. So we will like personally go on calls with our bigger customers and talk to them about their mobile strategy. And they have a lot of questions about how do they create good experiences on mobile, and what do we recommend they do? They have Salesforce for desktop. Should they put those same things on mobile? Should they curate it more? Like what kinds of things should they be thinking about? So we have a lot of those conversations with customers and talking to them about the problems they're experiencing, what their goals are, who their users are. And then on the end user side, we do have a mechanism that prompts end users for feedback inside the mobile app. And that feeds into our user research. We have a dedicated user researcher for mobile who can run usability studies, send out surveys to end users. So I think a lot of the end user communication goes through user research.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have data scientists who help us get the right data that we need to understand how people are using our app. And that can be very different depending on the organization because things are so customizable, but allowing us to really dig into how are people in this organization using the app? Like what are people's workflows? Like how often are they logging in? What are they trying to do? So there's definitely a combination of a lot of different methods to try to look for patterns and figure out what the biggest pain points are and the biggest opportunities.
Cool, cool. Very interesting. And you mentioned a lot of different roles like researcher, data scientist, and just out of curiosity, like how is the product team set up at Salesforce? And what kind of different roles do you work with, like researcher, prototyper, engineers, designer, visual designer, or maybe, I don't know, content strategist?
Yeah.
Elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we have a dedicated data scientist for mobile, a user researcher, and we also work with UX designers, of course. Salesforce doesn't separate, at least in my org, we don't separate between visual designers and like information architecture or anything like that. It's like product design, so they're a little bit more generalist. But we do have some other more specialized roles like content writers. They figure out exactly like what the text should be inside the product, as well as writing help articles and release notes. Anytime we put out new features or change something, our customers, because they rely on Salesforce so heavily and they build on top of it, they really need to know anytime something changes, how to be on top of it, how to make sure that their users are on top of it. So there's a lot of work that goes into content.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have product marketing, which helps us get the word out about major releases. So the Salesforce mobile app, we recently did a huge overhaul of the whole mobile app with completely new navigation, customized in a different way to make it a lot nicer and a lot easier to configure. And so we worked with marketing a lot to make sure that people understood what the changes were, they understood how to take advantage of it, all the advantages of it, and just making sure people knew about the new version. So yeah, we have a lot of support from different departments that help us make sure we're kind of considering all these different pieces of our customers' experience and our end users' experience.
Cool, cool. That sounds very interesting. And yeah, I heard there's some like key skill for becoming a Salesforce PM, which is like dependency management or project management. And what does this term mean for you? And how does this kind of soft skill help you better succeed in such a big organization as Salesforce?
Yeah, so prioritization is really hard, obviously, because you can't do everything.
We all know
But yeah, it's even harder at an organization like Salesforce, where you have so many different teams. Each team has their own roadmap of features that they want to build. But if you want to do a big feature of any kind, you can't do it alone. So the mobile team, we manage the mobile app, but if we need new APIs from other teams, or I mentioned how everything is configurable inside Salesforce. If we want new configuration for the admin, there's a team that owns admin configuration. So we need to partner with them in order to...
A totally different team, right? And being responsible for totally different API or features.
Exactly. So yeah, so if we want to execute on something big, we definitely need partnership from often multiple other teams within Salesforce in order to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be really challenging when they have other teams who are asking them for help with their features.
Uh, okay.
So yeah, there's definitely like a lot of negotiating that goes on in order to figure out how to get things done, how to get help on the things you need.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like at a high level,
Mm-hmm.
the way it's kind of set up, which I think actually really helps to guide people, is the company has so Mark Benioff, the Salesforce CEO, will publish
Mm-hmm.
his priorities for the year.
Okay.
Um, it's the format is called V2 Mom. It's vision, values, method, obstacles, and measures. So it's basically just like, what are we trying to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
What are we working toward, and like how are we going to get there? And then his direct reports will write their goals, which are a little bit more specific,
Mm-hmm.
based on
Execute this Salesforce strategy as a whole year, right? Or
exactly.
okay.
And then that kit cascades basically from the top down, so that everyone's writing their goals to be specific to their team, but also making sure that they align with the vision of the broader company or the larger team that they're within. And it is very feels very formal and hierarchical for somebody who comes from a startup background. Like, this is the first big company I've ever worked for.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it can be really helpful in a situation where
Mm-hmm.
a team is being asked for help from like 20 other different teams to execute on their features, and they have to make a choice of what to prioritize.
Such
They,
a popular team being needed by 20 plus teams.
yeah, there are some teams that they basically, most of what they do is fulfill dependencies for other teams.
Uh,
So they have to prioritize. They can't know all the intimate details of everybody else's features all the time. So they can kind of look to those goals that were set up in their organization, or even at the next level up, to see which projects align most with the highest priority company goals and do those first.
okay, cool. And another follow-up questions toward this kind of a little bit complicated or maybe politic related. I'm not sure if that's the right term for Salesforce, but how do you, as a PM, to be diplomatic enough to sort of represent your team to go out, and because it sounds like for me, maybe I'm interpreted it in the wrong way, but it sounds like every team is like their own country, and so many different countries make up the whole nation, like United Kingdom, maybe.
Yeah.
How do you sort of represent your team to go out and negotiate with other team to get what your teams need and at the same time fulfill other teams need?
Yeah, yeah, that is definitely,
Of like, if okay, I want to get A, if you can help me prioritize A first, I will try to get a B, which is what you want to get first.
yeah. So, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of people do that very explicit, like, I'll do this for you if you do this for me, type of exchange. Because I do think people do care, like they want to do what's best for the company as well, and they do need to make sure that things align with like what their org is doing as a whole. But there's definitely an aspect. I mean, in everything, like personal relationships are an important factor, but I think that's especially the case when you're trying to convince other teams to help you with your feature instead of helping another team with their feature potentially. So I think the formal process for dependencies is you file a team dependency on that team, which is basically like a Jira ticket, if you've ever worked in Jira, or like it's like kind of filing an official document that's like, hey, we are requesting this thing from your team to help us with this feature we're building, and we are requesting it for this release. Salesforce does 3 major releases per year, so we kind of organize work that way. And then they go into planning and they either say like, yes, we are going to prioritize this. No, we can't prioritize this, but we'll consider it for next release. Or they say like, we need more information from you, or something like that. But in reality, like, you don't just go filing team dependencies on other teams without talking to them. Like, it's always better if you know somebody on that team and have a personal relationship with them and can kind of go to them, explain what you're trying to do, and get a feel for whether it's something that might be
You
realistic.
can connect the people who you need more information on, right?
Exactly.
And for
So,
your,
yeah, and there's so many different teams. Like, you do it the same way in life. If if you're trying to get in touch with someone, it's good to go through your network. Like, if I need something from another team and I don't know anyone on that team,
okay.
I'll ask somebody else I work with closely if they know anyone, or I'll ask my boss.
Like
Yeah,
you always have to like sort of to connect to someone to get the thing you want because you
yeah,
cannot know everyone at Salesforce.
yeah. Yeah, everyone's human, right? So everyone wants to like be treated like people and have these real conversations when they're being asked for help.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely something that I'm like learning to navigate. It's not really something I had to do as much
Mm-hmm.
um, at small companies, but it's definitely a really interesting aspect of the job. And it can be really rewarding when you are able to build these partnerships and really kind of be on the same page about like what the priorities are and like what you're trying to build together. And you can create like really big features that are really impactful if you can kind of get buy-in and partnership from other teams in the
Yeah,
organization.
if you can connect to more resources, more teams, because the big features will sort of like influence everybody, sort of, right? So you
Exactly. Yeah.
definitely need everyone to participate. Cool, cool, amazing. And yeah, I heard some rumors, or not rumors, wrong word, sorry. But people say that at Salesforce, PM are not just PM. PM needs to present in a large conference or do some presentation like Dreamforce, for example, with hundreds of thousands of audience. So how do you sort of manage to do that? And like, wouldn't you be nervous at the first time?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely nervous when I present. Um, so I presented at Dreamforce last year. That's kind of our big yearly conference that over 100,000 people attend in San Francisco.
Mhm.
Um, this year it's canceled, unfortunately.
Okay,
Um,
I hear
but
that.
yeah, I went to Dreamforce last year for the first time and presented about the Salesforce mobile app roadmap.
Mhm.
And did a couple of other smaller sessions as well for admins, kind of explaining like, here's how you configure it on a more practical level. Um,
Okay.
and those weren't huge stuff. They were like a few hundred, I think was the biggest one.
Mhm.
And I also did a webinar for one of our releases that had like, I think over 1,000 people attending. And that was completely new for me. I never did things like that before I joined Salesforce. So I practice a lot. um, yeah, I'm not somebody who is naturally like I don't know if I'm a natural public speaker all the time, and I'm a little bit introverted myself.
Mhm.
So that's definitely a skill that I practice. I get feedback from my boss, whether it's a big presentation or whether it's just a roadmap conversation with a customer.
Mhm.
Figuring out how to adapt to those different situations and still feel poised, but also like conversational. You don't want to feel like you don't want to sound like a robot when you're up on stage. You want to sound like a
Yeah.
person. So how do you rehearse but not become robotic?
Not
But yeah, I found
lines,
practice.
right? You want to be a person presenting, not just a robot repeating sentence. Yeah.
But it's hard to act like you're having a conversation when you're like on a stage. So it's trying to put yourself in the mindset of try to speak to people, like directly to people, even if there's an audience of 500 people.
Yeah, cool, cool. But to be honest, right now you really feel like a very professional and confident public speaker. Yeah, I'm very happy for that.
Yeah.
And another question is like, and I have to confess that I did peek into your linking. I saw like you first started as like music and performance major students at Northwestern University, and then you sort of transfer into like a developer and then you transfer into a product designer and then a product manager. And right now you're a senior product manager at Salesforce. Like every single transition feels so successful and still yet natural for you. So to sort of use a Steve Jobs quote, like what kind of dots connect you to this point,
Yeah.
and what motivate you to make those transition that require you to work out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I majored, yeah, when I back in going back to when I was in college, I majored in flute performance. So I was doing music completely outside of tech. And I realized that that wasn't something I wanted to do for my career. And I decided that I wanted to go into user experience design.
Oh.
So I initially did want to go into UX design, but I didn't have any credentials. Like I didn't have a degree in design. Um, so I had to kind of figure out how to get experience doing that thing and get my foot in the door in the tech world.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, learning how to do a little bit of coding, a little bit of front-end development, was really, I think, what allowed me to get my first internship and eventually like more real jobs within tech. Because knowing how to code is a much more like tangible skill. And it's very hard to learn how to design without that. Like you can't design in a vacuum, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, so I did some side projects. My friend and I built a little Facebook app that told you how much of a hipster you were based on whether you liked music before your friends did. Uh,
Is it still available on Facebook?
it's not. I think
Oh, okay.
they took it down like a long time ago,
Fine.
but it worked for a while. It was really fun. And it was just a way to put something together and put it out there and say like, okay, I can code this thing. I designed this thing. It wasn't very good. But put that in a portfolio and be able to say like, hey, I can figure out how to execute something. And I think that allowed me to get an internship at a really small startup, doing some design, some development. And then I moved to San Francisco. I was in Seattle at the time. I moved to San Francisco and got my first kind of like legitimate job at a very small startup doing both. And that was sort of the value proposition that I was able to bring to the table for these tiny companies was like, I can wear a lot of different hats and fulfill both design and development for you.
And that was at LSET, correct?
Yeah. So yeah, the first company I worked for in San Francisco is called Allset. It was a travel company. They were really small. They were trying to raise a seed round of funding, and they did 500 startups, which is an accelerator in the Bay Area. And I did that with them, which was a really cool experience.
Cool. And after LC, like you sort of still like want to be a designer, right? And you transfer to another company called Goldbelly. Can you sort of like elaborate a lot about the experience there?
Yeah. Yeah, so I was doing development and design at that point. And I was actually really enjoying doing both. I guess I've always been a little indecisive. Like I like doing a lot of different things at once. And at Goldbelly, I actually had like some mentorship from some other people who were coding, from the founder who was a designer, which was really amazing. At Allset, I was kind of the only one doing that job, and I kind of had to just figure it out. So I learned a ton about development, about best practices for coding, about writing tests, unit tests. I was writing that stuff, and then also about design. Like I think prior to that, I had this expectation that I should just be able to talk to users, figure out what they need, and then just like immediately have a good design like and just rush right into that. So I learned a lot about how to look at other examples of people trying to solve similar problems, like look at other sites that are doing something similar and get inspiration from them. And then really just try out a lot of different things until you have something that makes sense, like tweaking layouts and screens. And just like there's a lot of just kind of grunt work in some ways
Yeah.
that can go into making something nice. And yeah, at Goldbelly, it was a very fun company. They are a consumer company that basically you can order, if I'm in San Francisco, I can order a deep dish pizza from Chicago,
Wow.
FedEx to me overnight. So I can order from like famous restaurants across the US.
The delivery fee must be a little bit expensive, right? It might
Yeah,
not.
it's pretty high to get things overnighted on like dry ice. So yeah.
Okay, okay. Very
um,
interesting business model. Like
yeah.
you can order some famous restaurant or Michelin restaurant from New York, maybe.
Yeah, and they're still around. The company, like headquarters, moved to New York, but you can go to goldbelly.com and order and see what they have and order things
Are they
from.
still okay during this pandemic or?
They are. So I know it's actually there. They have some restaurants where it's just a one-person shop. So it is coming from these independent restaurants. So if the restaurant's open, they can ship out. I'm sure not everything is shipping, but and it is, I think, still U.S. only right now, though I could be wrong.
There
So
are still some restaurant available, right? And they can sort of survive on that.
yeah,
Cool, cool. And I noticed that after Goldbelly, like you're sort of shying away from being a developer and transferring into like a dedicated product designer at Double Dutch.
yeah.
Just out of curiosity, like why wouldn't you want to do both design and development at the same time? And why you switch to like another company?
Yeah. Yeah. I really enjoy being able to do both. It's nice to feel like
Mhm.
self-sufficient. Like you can just design and then create something and like not depend on anybody else in a lot of ways. But I think one of the things I realized was that if I really wanted to get to the next level in terms of my design skills, then I needed to focus a little bit more. So I decided that I wanted to focus on design because I was finding myself doing a lot of coding and coding my own designs, which for me, I would find that when I was thinking about designing something, it was very hard to put aside the developer part of my brain. Like I was like, oh, I'm going to have to code this tomorrow. Like maybe I should just design something that's easier to build.
One will definitely kill me tomorrow, right? I don't want to do it because this is so fucking hard. Sorry, I'm using wrong.
Yeah.
This is so hard.
Yeah. So yeah, and it's important. Like it's important for designers to be able to think about what's achievable from a technical perspective, but at the same time, I also think it's really important to be able to start with more of an open mind and think through like what is the ideal user experience. Like let's put aside everything else, think through that, and then from there figure out how do we get there, what's the first step. And I think
not to confine by the technical restraint at the very beginning.
exactly, yeah, exactly. So I think it was kind of, I felt like it was kind of limiting me from thinking big in terms of user experience. And so when I transitioned to Double Dutch, I decided that I really wanted to only do design and focus on that and really become a better designer.
Cool, cool. Yeah, designers and developers and also PM, like we all share a very different mindset. Like designer is more creative, not so logical, but developer is like super logical because like, yeah, coding is like, it's either 1 or 0, right? And for PM, maybe like thinking through a bigger picture. And yeah, just out of curiosity, what does Double Dutch do for its business?
Yeah. Yeah, so Double Dutch is another startup, but a bigger startup than I'd ever worked for. I had a lot of other designers that I was working with there, which was great. And I hadn't experienced that as much in the past. But they are an events app company. So they have an event like a mobile app. If you go to a conference and you download a mobile app for that conference, the people who hosted that conference probably purchased some sort of events app software in order to configure that app and publish it. If it's a huge conference, maybe they custom build the whole app themselves, but most people don't want to publish their own mobile app for a single event. So we had software where you as a conference host could go in and configure your app, put all your sessions and speakers and details in there and your branding, and then Double Dutch would handle getting that app published to the App Store with the event name on it.
Cool, cool. And just out of curiosity, like is Double Dutch later on like acquired by Salesforce, and that kind of Dutch event app become a part of the Salesforce event app?
No, so Double Dutch was acquired by Cvent, I believe, almost a year ago now. Salesforce does have their own events app, but it's only used for Salesforce conferences. So it's not like a thing that we sell. And I do some work on the events app as well, although there's not a lot of in-person events happening right now, unfortunately. So there's less work to do on that right at this moment.
So basically, Salesforce app use the event app to customize Salesforce own conference or events, like.
Exactly. Yeah. So Salesforce has their own events app that's just for Salesforce conferences.
Okay, cool. And later on, you switched to like Kelvin and become like a product designer and PM, and also my amazing design manager. So why did you switch to Kelvin, and what sort of motivate you to like switching from design track into a PM track eventually?
Yeah, so I think working at Double Dutch, I really enjoyed making B2B products. So things that people are actually using in their workplace that help them be better at their jobs. Like I found that very motivating. And so I wanted to work on another B2B product. Kelvin does industrial automation. So they have tools for configuring control systems for oil and gas wells. As you know, Tab, we work there together. But that's also like a very complex product.
It is.
Yes. And had a lot of configurability in it. So there's a lot of like, how do we help our customers customize this product to work for them? And with control systems for huge machines like oil and gas wells, you have to instill a lot of trust in your customers in terms of making sure they know what's happening with their machinery, making sure they can see that you are making them successful, optimizing their production, and that they can shut on and off your control like at any time they want. So I think there are a lot of fun challenges around that. I think Double Dutch was the first company I ever worked for where there were any product managers. So prior to that, I was at these small companies and I didn't even know what a product manager was. So like I was participating in a lot of that, like designers, engineers, whoever else was in the room, like we were all the product managers. So I started thinking about whether I wanted to be a product manager while I was at Double Dutch. And it took me a little while to decide that I wanted to transition to that because I really liked designing. And I also, like, I really wanted to be doing strategic, like, roadmap work. Like, I love thinking about all these different pieces and how they fit together. Like, how do our user needs mesh with our business needs, mesh with our customer needs, and how do we make sure we can actually deliver these things with engineering? So I love like looking at these problems holistically, which is kind of why I wanted to move into product. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to let go of being a designer. And I think that was sort of the hesitancy for me is as a designer, and for anyone who's worked as a designer, you may have experienced this as well, that sometimes you work with a product manager or even anyone else in your organization who thinks they know exactly how to design things and really wants to tell you exactly what to design.
But yeah, yeah.
So yeah, and I don't think that's
yeah.
yeah, and I think it's important like that the designers have autonomy and freedom to determine the user experience. So I felt like I wasn't quite ready to give up control of design for a while, and I knew that I didn't want to be a product manager who then just like also wanted to control the design.
Yeah.
So I think at Kelvin, I kind of finally felt like I was ready to start to relinquish control over all the details of design and focus more on strategy and scoping and all of that stuff.
Design, right? Cool, cool, amazing. And later on, you switch to Salesforce, right? And that's where you are right now. Cool, cool, amazing. And yeah, I still have some few questions like, you know, right now our audience, we are mostly like Chinese audience, and some of us are really interested in like maybe switching from design into PM route in the future or in the near future. So what kind of advice would you give to us or to give to the audience, um, as a non-native speaker or a second language speaker, to sort of like not only to survive, but also strive in a company, US tech company like Salesforce?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I do think that product management is one of those roles that is different at each company. Salesforce, definitely, there's a lot of presenting. I think a lot more presenting and like public speaking and talking to customers than there is at some other companies. But I think the big thing to think about in making the transition from design into product management is if you enjoy the complexity of conflicting priorities and trying to piece together what to do when sometimes you have your end user wants something, they want something to be easy. They don't want to have to put all of their data into this tool so their boss can see it. And then you have your customers who want to put more features into something that maybe already feels too complex for the end user. And then you have stakeholders internally, you have dependencies that you're managing, and you have to decide whether to build a feature you can do on your own versus something that depends on another team. So I think if you are someone who like embraces the chaos and complexity of that, then product management could be something to explore. And I think if you're a designer and you are thinking about product management, like I would just say form an opinion on what features you think you should build next. Think through like, hey, if I have this product, like what should the roadmap be? What should we do? And then start to question that. Or if you work with product managers, like ask your PM like, hey, what kind of factors go into the priority of these items, and what makes this more important than this. Just try to start engaging in those conversations and thinking about not just end user experience, but also like all of these other factors that go into the priority of features.
All about all the stakeholders, right? Your manager, developer, engineers, and design.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and start engaging with engage with engineers. Like, get into Jira or whatever tracker you use to manage engineering work, and like start writing tickets for developers and get close with them. Engineers are your friends. They're the ones you
not your enemies.
So get in the heads of your engineers. They're powerful allies.
Cool, amazing. And okay, here comes the most important questions, and also maybe the last questions from me. Like,
Mhm.
I heard some rumor that Salesforce is still hiring, and you know the world is super wild right now due to the COVID-19 situation. Like, has
Yeah,
the pandemic impact Salesforce a little bit? And is Salesforce still hiring for great PMs and designers?
yeah, yeah. So I mean, of course, the pandemic I think has impacted everyone. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think Salesforce has been really fortunate, at least so far, that we are still hiring.
Like,
Um, I think one of the things that Salesforce has really been thinking about is how do we help our customers figure out how to navigate the pandemic. So
mm,
we are spinning up new initiatives to try to help our customers with that. We have, something called work.com to try to really like lead the charge of like, how do people reopen safely and gradually? Um, and how do we help our customers think about that?
okay.
So we do have new initiatives that we're starting. We are still hiring, and yeah, I definitely feel really lucky to be at Salesforce
Yeah.
during this crazy time.
Mm-hmm. And I'm asking this for those audience, like, could they connect you on LinkedIn? And if possible, if they're a good fit, could they kindly ask you for a referral?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, my specific, like my smaller team isn't hiring right now, but if there are open roles that you're interested in, definitely feel free to connect with me. And I'm happy to, yeah, do what I can to connect you with the right people.
Cool, cool. And right now, I would like to pass the baton to every audience, and we might switch the policy, not policy, the interaction style a little bit. Like, I will let you to sort of raise hand if anyone want to ask Angela's questions, and I will unmute you. So if you want to ask Angela any questions that we haven't covered before, please just raise your hand or, yeah, let me know. So any questions? Like, we have like 10 minutes left. Um, we're experiencing some weird silence. No, no questions. Okay. I will unmute the Andrew.
Oh, it looks like there's a question in the chat.
Yeah. Uh, oh, I really don't like Zoom. How do I unmute you? Okay, cool. I think you are unmute right now, Lihan. Yeah.
Oh, hi. Hi, Angela. I was wondering what was your biggest challenge you faced when you were switching to PM from designer?
Yeah. Um, so I think for me, I found it because I was at a startup. I think it was a little bit easier to switch roles just from like a logistical perspective. I think that can be harder at a big company, but at a startup, it's often easier to make those lateral moves to a new role. Um, but I think the hardest part is getting, yeah, I don't know. I think for me, like being a PM at Salesforce, there is a lot of presenting. There's a lot of like trying to build these relationships and negotiate for dependencies. Um, and I think that piece has been the most challenging for me. Like I mentioned, I am kind of introverted naturally, and I like having, one of the things I liked about being a designer was having time to just kind of like be by myself for a few hours and like work through problems
Mm-hmm.
and like work on things. And now as a PM, like I don't have hours of time during the day when I don't have meetings. Like it's most of my job is being in meetings and like consulting with other people, making sure things are on track, making sure people have what they need in order to continue to do their jobs, and like switching directions when something's not working. Like maybe we thought we could develop something in this
Mm-hmm.
timeline, but then we ran into a big engineering obstacle and it doesn't actually work. Maybe we thought this other team was going to be able to help us with this thing, but then they fell behind and they weren't able to help us. So there's a lot of a lot of that and a lot of making slide decks, which I didn't expect. So you don't have to love making slides, but tolerating making a lot of slides.
Okay. Cool, cool. And I noticed there are some new audience just joining. And yeah, if you have any questions specific for Angela, just raise your hand or type in questions in the Zoom chat so I can unmute you and you can directly interact with Angela. So any more questions, like anything you want to ask about like Salesforce, about the designer's role, PM roles, and maybe developer roles? Anything else? Yeah, maybe I can follow up. Like Lihan just raised a very interesting question. It's like, what's the biggest challenge? And just out of curiosity, like, what's the biggest achievement so far for working at Salesforce?
Oh wow. That's hard to say. I think so. I'm really motivated by being able to actually take a feature and put it into the hands of end users so they can use it and like it makes their lives easier. Mm-hmm. So this is maybe going to sound like something small, but I think things move a little bit more slowly at a large company than they do at a startup. Mm-hmm. So I was really proud of being able to ship my first feature that like I spec'd out, I took through development,
credit, right.
Went out to users back in February. And that was the ability to share the link to a page inside the Salesforce mobile app.
Wow, amazing. And
so yeah, it's cool to
users and customers did that feature actually impact?
Sorry, what was that?
Like how many customers or what's the, like how large is the user base has specifically have impact on?
So for mobile, it's probably like 1.5 million users got that feature. So yeah, it feels like this kind of small thing, and like, I don't know, every mobile app has sharing, but we didn't have it, and like I was able to like drive that to happen, and we got some feedback from users that was basically like, thank God I can finally do this, and I don't know, it's just really rewarding to be able to make someone's job just a little bit less painful, or like allow them to focus on what they actually want to be doing.
Okay, I noticed there's a new questions from Jay, like, Jay, I'm trying to unmute you and let me know. Okay, Jay, you can directly speak to Angela. Like, yeah, like your questions, like what parts of PM calls for greater demands compared with product designer? Like, could you elaborate a little bit on that? Hey, Jay, can you hear us?
Oh, yeah, I can. Thank you. And thank you, Angela. Thank you for your sharing. I'm curious about that, what parts of PM's work calls for a greater demands, or we can say higher requirements to compared with product designer.
Like higher requirements in terms of just things that are more difficult, like in my job.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kinds of
that. I think definitely being kind of the point person for moving things forward is hard. So if I'm in a meeting and we're talking about a feature that I'm building and everyone in the meeting is like, oh, someone should really do X.
Okay.
It's like I'm kind of on the hook to like make sure that thing happens.
Okay. You need to make sure that someone will be willing to do X, right?
Exactly, yeah. So, and if somebody is like, oh, I need to meet with somebody on this other team and they don't know how to do that. So it's just kind of like keeping an eye on everything and make sure that nobody is stuck. And I think that it actually adds a lot of overhead just in terms of like, sometimes it'll be like, oh, I have not checked in on this feature that my engineers are working on for like the last week. Like, how are they doing? I need to check in and make sure that they're okay. Or making sure that, yeah, so if someone can't move forward on a feature I'm working on, like that's kind of ultimately it's on me kind of. So I need to make sure that everyone has what they need. Not everyone is proactive when they get stuck on something. Sometimes people, they go and they try to figure it out on their own, which can be great, but also like I want to make sure that they're not getting too stuck, and that if there's something I can do to help them move forward, that I'm doing that thing.
Cool, amazing. And thank you, Jay, for your great questions. And any other questions you want to ask Angela? We maybe have one last questions left for the last 3 minutes. Anything will be fine. If yeah, we're continuing with some weird science again. Well, I'll follow up like this might be a little bit harder. Like what if the person who needs to do X and he's really stuck and he's really passive and he doesn't really want to do this, and it's on you and you are facing a rather fierce or strict timeline? How would you sort of help this, or has this kind of situation ever encountered with you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think I'm really fortunate to work with people who are genuinely really motivated to get things done. And to do the right thing for users, for the company, for the rest of the team that's depending on them. But I think one of the interesting things about being a product manager is that I do have responsibility for like the product and moving that forward. But at least at a company like Salesforce, I don't actually directly manage any of the people on my team. So the engineers report to their engineering manager, who's kind of my counterpart on the team. And the designers report to their design manager. So in a way, that's kind of nice, because I always have, there's always somebody who, like, I'm not responsible for developing their, like, an engineer's career and like weighing in on how they can become a better coder. And I have like a partner who, if there was an issue or we weren't sure what someone was motivated by or what they wanted to work on, I have kind of someone who I can consult with on that. So I think that is really nice, is having partnership from those like function-based leaders, like design managers, engineering managers, and stuff like that. But I think generally, like, people want to do good work. So if they're not doing it, there's usually some reason why. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to uncover that or figure out what's going on. But
to move back to the right track. Yeah. Cool. And thank you, Angela. We cannot learn enough from you. And I think right now it's a time to say goodbye. and the audience, please feel free to connect Angela on LinkedIn or connect me on LinkedIn. And please, if you're interested in the next podcast, might be a Tencent designer for the interaction designer for the game streaming, live streaming in China. And we will also release some related like Alibaba job posts on our Yingtutu product design or Yingtutu 产品设计 on our WeChat channel. So yeah, thank you so much and have a great day, okay? And thank you so much, Angela. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.